1945. Deep Siberian Taiga. A special regime camp for political prisoners. The temperature outside is -42 degrees. In barrack number 17, among prisoners dying of dystrophy, one man is assembling from copper wires, stolen nails, and glass shards a device that should not exist. A device that in a month will save his life and change the fate of the entire camp. This man was neither a saboteur nor a spy. He was a physicist, and his crime was that he knew too much. Viktor Semyonovich Kartashov, 42 years old, professor of the Department of Experimental Physics at Leningrad University, laureate of the Stalin Prize, second degree for work in the field of radar, a man whose developments helped win the war, and a man whom this same war consumed. He was arrested on the 23rd of May, 1945, 18 days after Germany's capitulation, when the whole country was rejoicing, when Moscow was saluting with 30 volleys from 1,000 guns. 3 men in civilian clothes came to his apartment on Nevsky. They did not shout, did not break furniture. They simply said, "Pack up." Article 58, treason to the motherland. Victor did not understand. Treason. He had given 5 years to the war. He worked in a closed design bureau where he created guidance systems for anti-aircraft installations. His radars shot down German bombers over Leningrad. His formulas were classified with a top-secret stamp. He saved thousands of lives. What treason! But in the Black Raven, when they were taking him to Litani to the NKVD basements, the investigator explained everything to him very simply. Viktor Semyonovich, during the blockade, when hundreds of thousands of people were dying of hunger, exchanged a piece of bread for a book. Not a simple book, a German textbook on quantum mechanics, published in Berlin in 1937. Heisenberg's textbook, an enemy of the people. It was a gift from a colleague, a German Jewish emigrant who had fled from Germany and worked with him at the university before the war. This colleague died of hunger in 42, and the book remained with Victor. He read it at night by the light of an oil lamp, chewing carpenter's glue, because there was nothing else to eat. He learned from the enemy. And this, in the eyes of Smersh, was proof of connection with German intelligence, proof of ideological sabotage, proof that Professor Kartashov was unreliable. The investigation lasted 3 months. They did not beat him. They did not break his fingers. They talked with him, intelligently, wearily, as with an idiot. The investigator, a colonel with dead eyes, smoked Kazbek cigarettes and explained to him that science can be correct and incorrect, Soviet and bourgeois. Victor tried to object, tried to explain that physics has no nationality, that an electron is the same in Moscow and in Berlin, but the investigator looked at him like a child and shook his head. "You, Professor, are too smart, and smart people are dangerous." The sentence was pronounced on the 21st of August. 10 years of correctional labor camps without the right to correspondence. This was a formula. Without the right to correspondence meant that for his relatives, he was dead. His wife Nina would receive a death notice. His daughter Katya would grow up an orphan, and he himself would go where people do not return from, to Siblag, to camp number 47, to a zone where politicals worked at timber felling, dying like flies from cold, hunger, and unbearable labor. The train went for 32 days, cattle wagons, packed with people like herrings in a barrel. Stench, lice, dysentery. Victor rode in silence, pressing his forehead against the dirty wall of the wagon. Next to him, people were dying. Their bodies were thrown out at stations like rubbish. He counted the knocking of wheels. He solved differential equations in his mind. He clung to mathematics like a life preserver, so as not to go mad. because at that moment in the rumbling wagon of death, he already understood the main thing. He had been sentenced not to 10 years. He had been sentenced to death, simply stretched out in time. They arrived in September. The camp met them with the howl of a siren, the barking of German shepherds, and the silent hatred of the convoy. The zone spread out in a lowland, surrounded by taiga, like a festering wound on the body of the earth. Barracks gray, lopsided with small windows covered with barbed wire. Towers with searchlights and machine gunners. Wire in 6 rows under current. Beyond the wire, a dead zone. 20 meters of trampled earth. Beyond it, taiga. Impassable, indifferent, deadly. They were lined up on the parade ground. The camp commander, a major with the yellow face of an alcoholic, walked along the line, examining the arrivals like cattle. "You are not people here," he said quietly. "You are enemies of the people. You will work off your debt to the motherland, if you survive." The timber felling norm, 10 cubic meters per person per day. Do not fulfill the norm, you will receive a penalty ration. 300 grams of bread and balanda. On a penalty ration, you will last a month, maybe 2, if you are lucky. Any questions? There were no questions. Everyone was silent. Victor looked at these barracks, at this wire, at these towers, and he understood. Here, his knowledge, his Stalin Prize, his title of professor were worth nothing. Here he was simply a prisoner, number SJA 312, and he had exactly 1 chance in 100 to live until spring. The first week, Viktor Semyonovich simply survived. Rise at 5 o'clock in the morning to the sound of a rail, which they beat with a metal rod. Balanda, liquid as slops, with rotten cabbage leaves floating in it. 300 grams of damp, sticky bread with an admixture of sawdust. Assignment to work. On foot in formation of 5 people, 6 kilometers through the taiga to the clearing. Convoy with dogs and machine guns. Fog spreads over the ground like a shroud. Cold pierces through. Timber felling. This was not even work. This was execution in installments. 2-handed saws, rusty axes, centuries-old larches 3 arm spans thick. Victor had never in his life held an axe in his hands. He was a physicist, a man of formulas and drawings. His hands were accustomed to a slide rule and pencil, not to this heavy, clumsy piece of metal. He felled the first tree for 4 hours. His partner, a criminal nicknamed Zora, spat and cursed, but helped because the norm was shared. If both do not fulfill it, both will receive a penalty ration. By the end of the first day, Victor's hands were covered in bloody blisters. By the end of the week, the blisters burst, turning into purulent wounds. He wrapped his palms with rags torn from his underwear, but this did not help. Every swing of the axe was torture. He would fall on the bunks in the evening and could not unclench his fingers. Zora looked at him with a smirk. "Professor," he said, "you will last 2 weeks, no more. Here all such clever ones die first. The head works, but the body does not pull. You should have stolen, not read books." But Victor did not die because he had what others did not have. He had a method. He began to observe, to look at those who survive, at old prisoners who had served 5, 7 years. They were not stronger, they were smarter. They knew where to cut a corner, how to fell a tree so that it would fall on a neighboring one and break it. 2 for the price of 1. How to saw not at full strength, but with intelligence, using the weight of the saw itself. How to choose thinner trees, which count towards the cubic capacity the same as thick ones. Victor absorbed this knowledge like a sponge. He applied to timber felling what he taught students: physics, levers, force vectors, center of gravity. He calculated the angle of the saw cut so that the tree would fall exactly where needed. He turned timber felling into a problem in mechanics, and gradually, through pain, through blood, through hatred of every damned tree, he began to fulfill the norm. Not over-fulfill. Fulfill exactly 10 cubic meters to receive a full ration, 700 grams of bread and normal balanda. This was enough not to die. But the camp killed not only with work. The camp killed with cold. October came, and the temperature dropped to -20. The barracks were not heated, or rather, were heated by one pot-bellied stove for 100 people. They gave out exactly enough firewood not to freeze to death, but not enough to get warm. Prisoners slept dressed, covered with padded jackets and everything they could find. They slept in heaps, 3 to a bunk, to warm each other. Victor slept between Zora and an old man named Kravtsov, a former railway engineer, also Article 58. It was Kravtsov who one night, when the whole barrack was shaking from cold, whispered to Victor in the darkness, "Listen, Professor, you are a physicist, are you not?" Victor was silent. It was dangerous to talk about past life. Too many informers. But Kravtsov continued, "I heard how you explained center of gravity to Zora. You are clever. Maybe you will think of how we cannot die here in winter, otherwise this coffin stove will not save us." Victor said nothing, but the thought took root. He began to think. The problem was simple and deadly. There was not enough heat. They gave little firewood. The pot-bellied stove devoured firewood like a steam engine, but heated poorly, because the heat went into the pipe, into the cracks, into nowhere. The efficiency of such a stove was about 20% at most. The rest flew away on the wind. It was necessary to increase efficiency. But how? He had no tools, no materials, not even paper for calculations. He had only his head. He began to observe the pot-bellied stove, studied it as an object of research. This was a primitive iron barrel with a door and a pipe. The firewood burned quickly, fiercely, giving off heat into the air. The pipe heated to red and glowed in the darkness of the barrack like a hellish poker. There it is. That is where the heat went. Into the pipe. It was necessary to make this heat work. A heat exchanger was needed. But what to make it from? Victor began to steal. Not food, not clothing. He stole metal at timber felling, on the camp territory, everywhere he could. A piece of tin from the barrack roof, nails from boxes, copper wire, which he found at the electrician servicing the searchlights on the towers. He hid all this under the bunks, in rags, in his miserable bag with personal belongings. Zora looked at him like a madman. "Professor, you have lost your mind. They will catch you with this iron. They will add to your sentence. What do you need it for?" Victor did not answer. He worked at night, when everyone was asleep, by the dim light of an oil lamp, which he made from a piece of cotton wool and stolen machine oil. He bent tin, using a stone as a hammer. He tied pieces with wire, making primitive connections. He had no welding, no soldering iron. Everything was done on twists, on bends, on insulating tape, which he exchanged at a worker from the economic department for his bread ration. He starved for 3 days, but got this insulating tape. He was building a coil, primitive, ugly, but functional. The idea was simple. Hot smoke from the pot-bellied stove goes into the pipe in a straight line and flies out. But if you pass it through a spiral, through a labyrinth of tin, it will give off heat to the walls, and the walls will give it to the air in the barrack. Physics. Increasing the heat exchange area, what he taught first-year students. Only now this was not a problem from a textbook. This was a question of life and death. After 2 weeks, the device was ready. It looked like a metal monster assembled from fragments of civilization. Tin plates, twisted into a semblance of a spiral, wrapped with wire. Everything held on an honest word and insulating tape. Victor looked at this monster and understood that it might not work, or work in such a way that it would block the pipe, and the barrack would fill with smoke, or, worse still, cause a fire. But there was no choice. November, -35. Every night in the camp, 3-4 people died. They simply did not wake up, froze in their sleep. Victor waited for the right moment. It was impossible simply to take and remake the pot-bellied stove. They would notice. The orderly would report to the barrack elder. The elder would report to the authorities. The authorities would conduct a search, find the stolen iron, and Victor would be charged with sabotage. That is another 10 years on top, or execution. A moment was needed when everyone would be distracted. And such a moment came. On the 6th of November, a fight broke out in the camp. Not a small scuffle, but a real massacre between criminals and politicals. It all started over a bread ration. A criminal nicknamed Bull took away from a political goner his 300 grams.
The goner could not stand it and hit Bull with a mug on the head.
Bull fell, but got up. And then it began. The whole barrack exploded. Politicals, who had been robbed for months, decided that enough was enough. Criminals decided to put them in their place. Sirens howled. The convoy came running, shooting in the air. Chaos. Victor at that moment was at the pot-bellied stove. Everyone rushed either to fight or to hide in corners. The orderly ran for the convoy. He had 10 minutes, maybe 15. He worked at frantic speed. His hands trembled not from fear, but from excitement. He unscrewed the pipe from the pot-bellied stove, using a piece of reinforcement as a wrench. The pipe was hot, burned even through the rags with which he wrapped his hands. He inserted his coil between the pot-bellied stove and the pipe, secured it with wire, wrapped it with insulating tape. Everything held on snot, but it held.
He barely had time to finish when the convoy burst into the barrack, machine guns at the ready.
Everyone was driven onto the bunks. The instigators of the fight were dragged out into the frost. They were beaten with rifle butts right on the parade ground so that everyone could see. Then they were taken to the punishment cell. Bull and 3 more criminals. The political goner and 2 of his defenders. The punishment cell in November is a death sentence, a concrete pit without heating, without bunks, bare floor and icy water up to the ankles. They will be kept there for 3 days. They will come out, if they come out, as cripples. At night, the barrack quieted down. Everyone lay down exhausted and frightened. Victor lay on the bunks and looked into the darkness. He did not know whether his device would work. The pot-bellied stove was lit as usual. The firewood was damp, burned poorly, smoked. The smoke went into the pipe. Victor held his breath. Now it would become clear. Either the smoke would go out through the coil, or it would get blocked and pour back into the barrack. A minute passed. 2. The smoke went normally. The pipe hummed as usual. But something was changing. Kravtsov, lying nearby, suddenly stirred. "Professor," he whispered, "what did you do with the stove? It has become warmer, or does it seem to me?" "It does not seem," Victor answered quietly. "Physics." Zora on the other side woke up, sat up. He looked around, felt the air with his hand. "Damn you," he said louder. "It really is warmer." "Professor, are you a sorcerer or what?" By morning, half the barrack already knew. By the evening of the next day, everyone knew. The pot-bellied stove heated better. Not much, not so that it became hot, but noticeably. By 5 degrees, maybe 7, the temperature in the barrack rose. This was enough. People stopped shivering in their sleep, stopped waking up with frostbitten toes.
Viktor Semyonovich Kartashov, number Shah 312, became the hero of barrack number 17. But fame in a camp is a double-edged sword. The barrack elder, a thief-in-law nicknamed Greek, summoned Viktor to his corner. Greek was the real power in the barrack, not the camp commander, not the convoy, but he decided who would live, who would die, who would receive an extra ration, who would be stabbed at night for violating the thieves' law. He sat on his bunks, separated from the general mass by a blanket, smoked makorka, and looked at Viktor with a heavy gaze. "Professor," he said, "you are clever, that is good. You made the stove, and people are not dying. That is also good. But there is a problem." "What?" asked Viktor. He knew what was about to begin. Greek took a drag. "The problem is that tomorrow the authorities will notice. They are not blind. They will see that in our barrack it is warmer. They will come, look at the stove, see your construction, and then either they will take it for themselves to the barrack of free workers, or they will arrest you for theft of iron and alteration of camp property. In any case, you are a corpse." Viktor was silent. He understood this, but there was no way out. Greek leaned forward. "There is an option. You will make the same thing for the camp commander, for his house. There is a wood-burning stove there, devours firewood like crazy. His wife complains that it is cold. You will do the same trick for him. He will be satisfied. He will turn a blind eye to our stove, and you will stay alive." Viktor looked at the Greek. "And how will I get into his house? This is a zone." The Greek smirked. "That is my concern. I have people everywhere. You just do what you know how to do. I will take care of the rest." 2 days later, Viktor was summoned to the guardhouse. He thought this was the end, that he had been exposed. But instead of arrest, he was led not to the punishment cell, but to the residential settlement of free hired workers. Small houses behind barbed wire, where the guards, the bosses, and their families lived. He was brought to the house of the camp commander, Major Gavrilov. The convoy remained at the gate. Viktor was led inside. The house was warm, smelling of cabbage soup and tobacco. Gavrilov came out of the room. Without a jacket, in an unbuttoned tunic, with a hungover face. He looked at Viktor as if he were an insect. "You are the professor?" "Yes, sir." "I heard you rebuilt the stove in the barracks. Clever." Gavrilov spat on the floor, right on the clean rug. "I do not give a damn about your tricks, but my wife, the fool, found out. She says, 'Do the same for me,' and I promised her. So you will work here, you will do the same thing to my stove. If you manage it, you will get an increased ration for a week. If you do not manage it, you will die in the punishment cell." "Understood, Viktor?" "Understood." He was taken to the kitchen. The stove was brick, large, normal, not a potbelly stove. The pipe was thick, the chimney wide. The task was more difficult. He needed to build a heat exchanger for a different design, but the principle was the same: increase the contact area of hot gases with air. He was given tools, real tools: a hammer, pliers, metal shears. He was given sheets of tin, given wire. Paradise for an engineer. He worked for 3 days, not in the barracks at night, but here, in the commander's house, under supervision. He was fed, given normal soup, white bread, even sugar in tea. He ate and cried inside from humiliation, from the fact that a piece of sugar seemed like happiness. He built a heat exchanger, more advanced than the one in the barracks, with calculation, with understanding of flows. He installed it in the chimney. They lit the stove. An hour later, Gavrilov's wife, a fat woman with the face of an overseer, came into the kitchen and gasped. "Vanya,
she shouted to her husband. "It is hot here. He really did it." Gavrilov came, touched the walls, grunted. "All right, the professor managed it. A week of increased rations is yours, but not a sound to anyone. Clear?" Victor was taken back to the barracks. The Greek met him with a smirk. "Well done, Professor. Now you are under protection. The boss is satisfied, which means we are in chocolate." And indeed, for a week, Victor was given a double ration. A kilogram of bread, thick stew with meat, even butter, 10 grams. He shared with Zora and Kravtsov. They ate in silence, reverently. This was not food, this was life. But in the camp, nothing remained secret. Rumors spread. In other barracks, they learned about the miracle stove. The prisoners began to grumble. "Why is it warm in the 17th and cold with us?" The authorities became nervous.
It was impossible to give some preferential treatment. This caused rebellion. And then Gavrilov made a decision. On the 15th of November, Victor was summoned to the guardhouse again. This time not alone. Along with him, 5 more prisoners were summoned. Those who had hands: a locksmith, a welder, a tinsmith, 2 assistants. All political prisoners, all Article 58. They did not take criminals for such work. They could steal, they could sabotage. Political prisoners were more reliable. They worked for food and the hope of survival. Gavrilov met them at his office. He was sober and angry. "Listen here," he said. "You will make the same stoves for all the barracks. There are 12 of them in total. You have a month. For each stove, an increased ration for your brigade for 3 days. If you do not finish before the frosts, mass deaths will begin, and I will be removed. And if I am removed, I will send you all to the punishment cell before I leave. So work. Materials will be issued. Tools will be issued. Professor, you are in charge. You will be responsible." Victor was given an old abandoned shed on the territory of the zone. There was a workbench, a vise, a forge. Tin, wire, metal scraps were brought there. This was a workshop, his workshop. He became not just a prisoner, he became a master, the head of a brigade. He gained power, small, pitiful, but power. He distributed work. He drew diagrams with coal on boards. He explained to the locksmith how to bend tin. He showed the welder where to weld seams. He turned into an engineer. For the first time in 6 months, he was doing what he knew how to do again. He was designing. The work went slowly. The cold grew stronger. Hands froze so much that they could not hold tools. Welding in the frost did not work. Metal cracked. But they worked, because each stove meant 3 days of increased rations. This was life. The first stove was installed in barracks number 3. They lit it. It worked. The prisoners gasped from the warmth. Rumors spread that the professor was a sorcerer healing barracks. The second was installed in the 5th barracks, the third in the 9th. With each stove, Victor refined the design, made it better, more efficient. He returned to science through hell. But not everyone was satisfied. In barracks number 11 sat punishment prisoners, refuseniks, rebels, those who could not be broken. Their elder was a man named Ermakov, a former colonel of the Red Army. He was arrested because in 42 he retreated without orders, saving the remnants of his regiment from encirclement. He saved 300 people, received 10 years for desertion and cowardice. Ermakov hated the system. He hated the authorities, and he hated those who cooperated with those authorities. When Victor came with the brigade to install a stove in the 11th barracks, Ermakov met them with silence. He sat on the bunks, tall, thin as a skeleton, with the burning eyes of a fanatic. The prisoners in his barracks were silent too. Victor began work.
disassembled the pipe of the potbelly stove, began to install the coil. And then Ermakov spoke. "Professor," he said quietly, "you are a collaborator. You work for the camp authorities. You sold yourself for rations. You help them keep us in this hell longer. Because if we do not die from cold, we will live. And living prisoners are their labor force. You prolong their system." Victor stopped. He slowly turned around, looked at Ermakov. "I am saving people," he said, "from cold, from death." "No," Ermakov answered. "You are saving the system. If all the barracks froze, if half the prisoners died, it would be a scandal. An inspection from Moscow. Maybe they would close the camp, but you give them a way out. You make the camp efficient. You are an engineer of the Gulag." The words hit like bullets. Victor stood with a wrench in his hands and could not answer, because Ermakov was right. He really was helping the system work. He was not sabotaging, he was improving. He was making the camp more viable. But what was he supposed to do? Refuse? Then they would kill him. Sabotage? They would kill him and the brigade. He chose life, his own and others. Was this a crime? Ermakov stood up, approached the potbelly stove, looked at the coil, then spat on it. "Get out of here," he said. "We do not want your stove. We will freeze, but we will not be part of their system." Victor looked at the prisoners in the barracks. They were silent. No one objected to Ermakov. This was the decision of the collective. He gathered the tools, silently left. The brigade followed him. The tinsmith, an old man about 60 years old, spat on the snow. "That colonel is a fool," he said. "They will freeze to hell, and for what?" Victor did not answer. He did not know who was right. In the evening, he reported to Gavrilov. The major went mad. They refused. "Sabotage. I will put them all in the punishment cell." But then he reconsidered. The punishment cell means noise, inspection, questions from the region. Why? He waved his hand. To hell with them, let them die. One less barracks, one less problem. Do the rest. Victor made the remaining 11 stoves out of 12. His brigade received their rations. The prisoners blessed the professor, but at night, lying on the bunks, he thought about Ermakov's words. Collaborator, engineer of the Gulag, savior or traitor. December. The frosts struck for real. -40, -45. The logging did not stop. People were driven to the clearings even in such cold. They fell right with saws in their hands. The convoy ran up, kicked with a boot. "Get up!" Some did not get up. They were left right there, by the tree. In the evening, corpses were loaded onto sleds and taken to the morgue. In December, 43 people died. This was normal statistics, winter deaths. But in the barracks where Victor's stove stood, the death rate was lower. About 30% lower. The authorities noticed. Gavrilov received a paper from the region. Gratitude for reducing mortality and increasing camp efficiency. He summoned Victor. "Well done, Professor," he said. "You saved my career. For this you will get a bonus, a kilogram of lard and a bottle of alcohol." Victor took the lard. He refused the alcohol. He did not drink. Gavrilov smirked. "Right. Alcohol here is currency. You will exchange it for what you need." Victor exchanged the alcohol for paper and a pencil. Real paper, a whole notebook with grid lines. He hid it under the bunks. At night, by the light of an oil lamp, he began to write. Not a diary, not memoirs. He wrote formulas. He returned to physics, to his real work. He recalled his pre-war calculations, his theories. He wrote down everything he remembered, because he was afraid of forgetting. He was afraid that the camp would erase from his head everything he had been. And the formulas were an anchor, a connection to his past life. Kravtsov once peeked. "What are you writing, Professor?" "Science," Victor answered. The old man grunted. "Who needs your science here?" "I do," Victor said, "so I do not forget who I am." Kravtsov thought, then nodded. "Understood. I draw bridge blueprints from memory, also so I do not forget. We are engineers. Without this, we turn into beasts." But in barracks number 11, where they refused the stove, catastrophe began. In December, 20 people died there, more than half the roster. They froze, got sick, died from pneumonia. Ermakov held on. He was strong, willful, but his people were dying. One morning, 5 did not wake up at once, froze to death, lay on the bunks like ice statues. Ermakov sat nearby and cried. He cried not from grief but from rage, at himself, at the system, at the whole world. On the 2nd of January, in the worst frost, -48, Ermakov came to Victor in barracks number 17, where it was warm, where people slept and did not die. He entered, thin, frostbitten, with sunken eyes. He found Victor, stood before him. "Professor," he said quietly, "I was wrong. You are not a collaborator. You just want to live and want others to live. I was an idiot. I killed my people for a principle. Make us a stove, please." Victor looked at Ermakov for a long time in silence. The colonel stood before him broken, but not bent. In his eyes was hatred for himself, but not pleading. This was a request from equal to equal. Not capitulation, but acknowledgement of a mistake. Victor understood what it cost this man to come here. It cost everything. Pride, principles, faith in being right. Ermakov lost 20 people for an idea, and now he was trading the idea for the lives of the remaining. "I will do it," Victor said, "tomorrow morning. But I need Gavrilov's permission." Formally, the 11th barracks refused. "If I come without authorization, it will be a violation. I will be punished." Ermakov nodded. "I will go to him myself. I will ask." He left. Zora, lying on the neighboring bunks, whistled. "Now that is a turn. The colonel on his knees. I thought I would not see such a thing." Victor did not answer. He lay and looked at the sooty ceiling of the barracks. Ermakov was not on his knees. He was on the edge between life and death of his people. And he chose life, like Victor, like everyone here. In the morning, the convoy came. "Professor, to the guardhouse, quickly." Victor dressed, went out. He was led not to Gavrilov, but to another building, to the medical unit. The camp hospital, a long barracks with a red cross on the wall. Inside it smelled of carbolic acid, purulent wounds and hopelessness. He was taken to the doctor's office. The doctor was military, a captain of medical service, about 40 years old, with the tired face of a man who had seen too many deaths. "Kartashov, sit down." The doctor opened a folder with documents. "I summoned you not just like that. We have a problem, an epidemic. Typhus fever. Already 8 confirmed cases. 4 died, the rest are in isolation. Do you understand what this means?" Victor understood. Typhus in the camp was a catastrophe. It was transmitted through lice, and lice were everywhere here. If not stopped, half the zone would die. Quarantine, closure, inspection from Moscow, execution of authorities for negligence. "Sanitary treatment is needed," the doctor said, complete. "All prisoners must be driven through the bathhouse, clothes into the disinfection chamber, barracks treated with chlorine." But there is one bathhouse for the whole zone. Small, it cannot cope. Not enough firewood, not enough water. The boiler is old, heats poorly.
300 people pass through per day, and we need to process 2,000 in a week. Otherwise, typhus will spread through all the barracks.
He looked at Victor.
Gavrilov said you know how to fix stoves. Can you fix the boiler in the bathhouse so it heats faster, so there is more water?
Victor thought.
A boiler is not a stove, it is a complex system.
He needed to see the design, but the principle was the same: heat exchange, efficiency, physics.
I can try, he said, but I need to look, and I need materials. You will get them.
The doctor closed the folder.
You will start working today. There is no time. Every day of delay means dozens of new infections.
The bathhouse was outside the zone in a separate building, a small log cabin with 2 sections, an anteroom and a steam room. The boiler stood in the corner of the steam room. A brick firebox, an iron tank for 300 liters, a pipe to the ceiling, everything old, shabby, half collapsed.
Victor examined the design, understood the problem. The boiler heated water slowly because the contact area of fire with the tank was small. The fire shot straight up into the pipe, and the tank stood to the side. Most of the heat was wasted. He needed to redirect the flame, make it heat the tank from all sides. He was given a brigade, the same people with whom he made stoves, given bricks, clay, iron. He worked for 3 days without sleep, relaying the firebox, building a new chimney that wrapped around the tank. Hot smoke now went not straight into the pipe, but in a spiral around the water, heated it from all sides, increased the heat exchange area 3-fold. This was engineering work, precise, verified. He drew diagrams on the floor with coal, explained to the mason where to lay bricks, checked every seam. On the 4th day, the boiler was lit. Victor stood nearby, dirty, exhausted, with eyes red from sleeplessness, watching the firebox. The firewood caught fire. Smoke went into the chimney. The tank began to heat up. An hour later, the water boiled. In the old boiler, this took 4 hours. The doctor came, checked the water temperature with a thermometer. 90 degrees. He looked at Victor. You are a genius, Professor. Now we can process everyone in a week. You saved the camp from an epidemic. Victor did not feel pride. He felt emptiness. He again saved the system, improved it, made the gulag more efficient. Ermakov was right. He was a collaborator. But what was he supposed to do? Sabotage? Let the epidemic wipe out half the zone? That would be murder. He chose life again. Sanitary treatment began. Prisoners were driven to the bathhouse in formation, stripped naked, clothes into the disinfection chamber, people under boiling water, shaved bald, soaped with dust against lice, issued clean, or rather, less dirty underwear. The boiler worked like clockwork. 500 people passed through per day. In a week, they processed the entire zone. The epidemic was stopped. There were no new cases of typhus. Gavrilov received gratitude from the region. The doctor received a bonus. Victor received 2 kilograms of sugar. He divided the sugar among the entire brigade, 300 grams each. This was wealth. Sugar in the camp was valued like gold. It could be exchanged for everything, from a hortka tobacco, for warm foot wrappings, for a place by the stove, for life. Zora cried when Victor gave him his share. You are a saint, Professor. You are a damn saint. Victor shook his head. Not a saint. Just a man who wants to live. But rumors about the miracle-working professor spread further.
Neighboring camps found out. Commanders of other zones began to arrive, looked at the stoves, at the boiler, asked for blueprints. Victor drew diagrams for them free of charge because he understood that the more camps implemented his system, the more prisoners would survive. This was his war.
A quiet engineering war against cold and death. Not against the system. He could not fight the system. He could only make it slightly less deadly. February. The frosts weakened. -20, -25 degrees. This was almost spring by Siberian standards. Logging continued. Victor worked at the cutting site during the day and in the workshop in the evenings. He now made not only stoves. He was asked to repair machines, saws, tools. He became the camp's jack of all trades, indispensable. And the indispensable were not touched. He was transferred to light work, freed from quotas, given the status of ITR, engineering and technical worker. This was a privilege. A separate table in the dining hall, enhanced rations, a bunk by the stove. He survived, but the price was high. He became part of the system. He was a cog that helped the machine work. Every night his conscience tormented him. He lay on the bunks and thought about his daughter, Katya. She was now 12 years old. She thought her father was dead. She lived with her mother in Leningrad. She received a pension for loss of breadwinner. 10 years without the right to correspondence meant death for the family. He could not write, could not let them know he was alive. This was forbidden. Violation meant the punishment cell and a new sentence. But he thought about her every day, imagined how she was growing up, going to school, perhaps studying physics as he once had. He wanted to pass something on to her, his knowledge, his love of science. But how? He was dead to her. And then he began to write not formulas but a book, a textbook for her, for Katya, a physics textbook written by a father for his daughter. He wrote at night in his notebook, which he hid under the bunks. He wrote in small handwriting, saving paper, explaining Newton's laws, thermodynamics, electromagnetism, as he had explained to his students, simply, clearly, with love. Kravtsov once asked, "Why are you writing this, Professor?" No one will see it anyway. They will confiscate it during a search, or it will burn or be lost. Victor answered, "I write so as not to forget, to remain the human being, a scientist, a father. If I stop writing, I will become just a prisoner, a number, an animal. And I do not want that." March. The camp commander Gavrilov summoned Victor to his office. The major's face was troubled. "Professor," he said, "we have a big problem. A commission is coming from Moscow, an inspection. They want to see how we reduced mortality, how we increased productivity. They will ask about the stoves, about the boiler, and they will ask about you." He took a drag on his cigarette. "You understand that you are a problem. You are Article 58, an enemy of the people, and you work like a leading worker of socialist labor. This is nonsense. This is ideological sabotage. How can an enemy of the people be useful?" Victor was silent. He understood where Gavrilov was leading. The major paced around the office, nervously smoking. "If the commission finds out that all our improvements were made by a political prisoner, and moreover under Article 58, they will decide that we are using enemies of the people in responsible positions. This is a violation of instructions. They will remove me, and you will be transferred to a punishment zone. There you will die within a month." He stopped, looked Victor in the eyes. "There is a way out. I will write a petition to the regional office. Review of the case, mitigation of sentence. I have connections. The doctor will sign a conclusion that you are an indispensable specialist,
bringing benefit to the national economy. They might reduce your sentence. Instead of 10 years, they will give 5, or even reclassify the article. Instead of treason to the motherland, they will give you a common crime. That is no longer an enemy of the people, but just a criminal. Victor understood. Gavrilov was not saving him. Gavrilov was saving himself. He needed to whitewash the professor so the commission would not ask uncomfortable questions. But Victor did not care. Any chance to reduce his sentence was a chance for life, for return to Katya, to Nina, to real life. "I agree," he said. "Do what is necessary." Gavrilov nodded. "Then listen carefully. When the commission comes, you will say only what I tell you. You are not a political prisoner. You are an engineer who fell under the article through stupidity, for contact with a German specialist who was later rehabilitated. You repented. You are atoning for your guilt through honest labor. You are devoted to Soviet power and personally to Comrade Stalin. Understood?" Victor nodded. Understood. He would lie. He would play the role of the repentant for the sake of life, for the sake of return. Conscience could be sold for 5 years of freedom. This was a profitable deal. The commission arrived on the 20th of March. 3 people from the regional NKVD administration, a colonel, a major, and a political officer in civilian clothes. They were driven around the zone, shown barracks with new stoves, the bathhouse with the improved boiler. They were shown mortality statistics. It was 20%. It became 12. They were shown production graphs, growth of 30%. The commission nodded grimly, made notes in notebooks. Then they asked to see that very engineer who had invented all this. Victor was brought to the commander's office. He stood before the commission thin, in a patched, padded jacket, but with a straight back. The colonel looked at him with a heavy gaze. "Kartashov Viktor Semyonovich." "Yes, sir." "Article 58, Part 1. Treason to the motherland." "Yes, sir." "What were you imprisoned for?" Victor repeated the rehearsed text. "For contact with a German colleague who turned out to be an agent of foreign intelligence. I did not know. I repented. I am atoning for my guilt through labor." The colonel squinted. "And why did you specifically undertake to improve the camp economy? Did someone force you?" Victor knew this was a trap. If he said they forced him, the commission would decide that the administration was exploiting political prisoners. If he said it was on his own initiative, the commission might suspect sabotage. Any initiative by an enemy of the people was suspicious. He chose the middle path. "I wanted to bring benefit," he said. "I am an engineer. I cannot see inefficiency and not correct it. This is my nature, my profession. And I believe that even an enemy of the people can atone for guilt by helping the construction of socialism." The political officer wrote down every word. The colonel was silent, then asked, "Do you have a family? A wife and daughter in Leningrad? Do they know you are alive?" "No. They were informed that I died." That is what is required by the sentence, without the right to correspondence. The colonel nodded. "Correct. An enemy of the people must be dead to his family." But he paused. "If you have truly reformed, if you have proven devotion to Soviet power, perhaps we will review your case. Perhaps we will reduce your sentence. Perhaps we will even restore the right to correspondence. But this will be decided by the court after our conclusion." Victor felt something break inside. Hope. Tiny, almost invisible. But hope. The right to correspondence. This meant he could write to Nina, let her know he was alive, that he loved her, that he was waiting. He could write to Katya, his daughter who thought her father was dead. "Thank you," he croaked. "I will not let you down." The commission left. Gavrilov was satisfied. They were pleased, he told Victor. You did well. Now wait. In 2 months, maybe 3, the decision will come. If you are lucky, the sentence will be reduced to 5 years.
You have already served 1.5. 3.5 will remain. That is not 10. That is life. Victor waited. April. May. The snow melted. The taiga came alive. Logging continued, but it became easier. Warm, long days, mosquitoes the size of sparrows. But this was not frightening. Winter was frightening. Summer in the camp was rest. He worked in the workshop, repaired tools, made new stoves for neighboring zones. His brigade lived well, enhanced rations, light work. They were the elite among prisoners. But in early June, something happened that no one expected. A new transport was brought to the camp. 50 people, political prisoners under Article 58. They were placed in the vacated barracks number 6. Among them was one person whom Victor recognized immediately. Professor Andrei Borisovich Levin, his colleague from the university, a theoretical physicist with whom they had worked together in a closed design bureau during the war. A man who was smarter than Victor, more brilliant, more dangerous. Levin saw Victor on the parade ground during roll call, stopped, looked. His face was emaciated, but his eyes were alive, burning. "Vitya, is that you?" Victor nodded silently. Levin came closer. The guards did not interfere. The transport had not yet been distributed to barracks. They were allowed to communicate. "I thought you were dead," said Levin. "Nina said you were shot." "No," answered Victor. 10 years without the right to correspondence. Levin smiled bitterly. "I have the same article, for the same nonsense, for contact with Germans, for cosmopolitanism, for reading bourgeois journals. They are imprisoning all of us, Vitya, everyone who is smarter than them." Levin was assigned to barracks number 6. Victor came to him in the evening, brought extra bread, sugar. Levin sat on the bunks and stared into emptiness. "Thank you," he said, taking the bread. "But why? I will die anyway. You know, I am ill. Tuberculosis, open form. They transported me in a transit car for 2 months. I cough up blood. I have 6 months left, maybe a year." Victor sat down beside him. "Do not talk like that. There is a medical unit here. The doctor is decent. He will help." Levin laughed. "Help? With what? There are no medicines here. No streptomycin, nothing. There is only fish oil and rest. And there is no rest in the camp. They will drive me to logging, and in a month I will die." Victor was silent. Levin was right. Tuberculosis patients were not treated. They were kept in common barracks, infecting others, and they waited until they died. There was one isolation ward with 5 beds. Only the dying were placed there. The rest worked until the end. But Victor could not simply watch a man die with whom he had shared a laboratory, with whom he had argued about quantum mechanics, with whom he had drunk vodka after dissertation defenses. "I will think of something," he said. "You will not die, not here." He went to the doctor. The medical service captain sat in his office and drank alcohol from a medical bottle. Victor explained the situation. The doctor listened, frowning. "Professor," he said, "I cannot help. Levin is a tuberculosis patient, open form. His place is in the isolation ward, but the isolation ward is full. 5 people are lying there, all at death's door. I cannot put him there until someone frees up a place. And places are freed only by corpses." Victor understood. This was a cue for death. Wait your turn. "But there is an option," the doctor continued. "If Levin works in an enclosed space without physical exertion and warmth, he will last longer. Maybe a year, maybe 2.
but there are no such places. All political prisoners are at logging. There is a place, said Victor. My workshop. I need an assistant, an engineer who understands technology. Levin is suitable. He is a physicist. He can do calculations, draw diagrams. The doctor looked at him for a long time. You want to save a friend? Yes. The doctor poured alcohol into 2 mugs. He handed one to Victor. Drink to friendship. Victor drank. The alcohol burned his throat. The doctor finished his mug. All right, he said. I will write a conclusion. Levin is not fit for heavy work. I recommend light labor indoors. But you must understand, if he dies at your site, they will hold you accountable. They will say you used a sick man. Victor nodded. I understand. I take responsibility. Levin began working in the workshop a week later. He was weak, coughed blood into a rag, but his head worked clearly. Victor gave him light tasks: draw diagrams, calculate dimensions, check angles and tolerances. Levin worked slowly but accurately. In the evenings, they sat in the workshop when everyone had left and talked not about the camp, not about sentences, but about physics, about science, about that world that existed before arrest and that perhaps still existed somewhere. Levin told about new works by Western scientists that he had managed to read before arrest, about quantum electrodynamics, about the theory of relativity, about nuclear fission. Victor listened eagerly, absorbing every word. Here, in the Siberian taiga, behind barbed wire, 2 scientists discussed the structure of the universe. This was absurd and beautiful at the same time. This was resistance not to the system, but to non-being. They remained human. One evening, Levin said, Vidya, I know what you are doing. You are saving me. You are taking risks for me. Thank you, but I want you to know I will die anyway. Maybe not in a month, but in a year. But I will die. Tuberculosis is not cured here. Victor was silent. Levin continued. But I do not want to die just like that. I want to leave something that will outlive me. I thought about this every day in the transit car, and I came up with something. He took out from his bosom several sheets of paper covered with small handwriting. This is my theory, a new approach to describing quantum fields. I worked on it for 5 years before arrest. It can change physics. But if I die here, it will die with me. No one will know. He handed the sheets to Victor. Take them. Memorize them. Hide them. If you survive, if you get out, publish this in my name. Let the world know. Let me remain at least in this. Victor took the sheets. His hands were trembling. This was a testament, the scientific legacy of a man whom the system was trying to erase from existence. I will remember, he said. I promise. If I get out, I will give this to the Institute in your name. Levin smiled weakly. Thank you, Vidya. Now I can die in peace. But Levin did not die. July, August, September. He held on, worked in the workshop, coughed blood, but did not give up. Victor fed him from his own rations. The doctor supplied fish oil and aspirin, everything that was available. Levin slowly faded but did not fade away. He lived and continued to think, calculate, create. At night, the 2 of them wrote in notebooks. Victor his textbook for Katya, Levin his theory. 2 scientists, 2 enemies of the people, 2 dead men according to documents, wrote science in a Siberian camp barracks. This was their revenge on the system. Quiet, paper revenge, but revenge. In October, the answer came from the regional office. Victor was summoned by Gavrilov. The major was drunk and cheerful. "Professor, congratulations. The case was reviewed, the sentence reduced to 5 years. The article was reclassified. Instead of treason to the motherland, failure to report a crime. This is no longer political, almost a common crime."
The right to correspondence was restored. You can write home. You are free in 3.5 years. You won, Professor. You survived. Victor stood and could not believe it. 3.5 years. This was real. This could be survived. He would get out in 49. He would be 46. Katya would be 16. He would see her. He would return to Nina. He would return to life. "Can I write now?" he asked. Gavrilov nodded. "Write through me. I will read it, put a stamp on it, send it." Censorship. Victor did not object. He was ready for anything. He sat in the commander's office at the desk and wrote the first letter in 2 years. "Dear Ninochka, I am alive. I am here. I am in the camp. But I am alive and well. Forgive me for being silent for so long. I had no right to write. Now I do. I will get out in 3.5 years. I will return. I love you. I kiss Katya. Tell her that Papa is alive and loves her. That I think about her every day. That I will return. I will definitely return. Your Victor." The letter went to Leningrad. Victor waited for an answer. A month. 2. The answer came in December. An envelope with a Leningrad postmark. Nina's handwriting. Victor opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a short letter. "Vitya, I am glad you are alive, but I must tell the truth. I married Semyon. Remember our neighbor? He helped us after your arrest. They told me you were dead. I waited a year, then I couldn't bear it anymore. Katya calls him Papa. Forgive me, I didn't know, but now nothing can be changed. Be well, Nina." Victor sat on the bunk and held the letter in his hands. He did not cry. Inside was emptiness. His wife had remarried. His daughter called a stranger Papa. He did not exist. He was dead to them. Legally, he had been resurrected, having received the right to correspondence. But in fact, he remained dead, because his place had been taken. His life had been lived without him. He was a ghost. Levin sat nearby. He read the letter, put his hand on Victor's shoulder. "Forgive me, Vitya, but you understand. She thought you were dead. She is a woman. She needed support. She did not betray you. She simply survived, as we all do here." Victor nodded. He understood. But it did not make it any easier. He had lost his family. He had saved hundreds of prisoners from the cold, stopped an epidemic, improved the camp economy. But he had not saved his family, had not protected them, because he was dead. And the dead have no right to a family. The winter of 1946 was cruel, frosts below -50, but the barracks were warm. Victor's stoves worked, people did not freeze, mortality remained low. Gavrilov received an order, the doctor received the rank of major. Victor received an extra ration of bread. Levin held on. He no longer worked, was too weak. But he lived. He lay in the workshop on the bunks that Victor had equipped for him and wrote formulas, finished his theory, expanded it. By February, his notebook was filled to the last page. On the 21st of February 1946, Levin called Victor, sat on the bunk with difficulty. His face was waxy. His eyes were sunken. "Vitya," he said, "I am dying today or tomorrow. I feel it.
The doctor says the lungs are failing. Victor wanted to object, but Levin stopped him with a gesture. Don't. I have lived a year longer than I should have. Thanks to you. Thank you. He held out the notebook. Here is my work, finished. I want you to do something. When I die, tell the authorities that this is your work. Let them put your calculations for the stoves and boilers in your personal file as proof that you are useful, that you are a scientist. This will help you upon release. And then, when you get out, give this to the Institute.
Say that this is the work of Professor Levin, a posthumous publication. Victor took the notebook. I cannot. This is your work, your life. I cannot appropriate it. Levin smiled. You are not appropriating, you are preserving. If you do not take it, it will burn after my death. The authorities will burn it as rubbish. But if you say that this is yours, they will keep it in your personal file, in the archive, and it will survive until your release. And then you will return my name to me, publish it under my name. I will live in this. This is the only thing I can leave to the world. Victor embraced him. I promise. Levin died the next day, quietly in his sleep. The doctor confirmed the death. The body was taken to the morgue. Victor came to Gavrilov, said that Levin had helped him with calculations for the stoves, that there was a notebook with formulas and drawings, that this was proof of his, Victor's, usefulness. Gavrilov leafed through the notebook, understood nothing, but nodded. All right, we will put it in your file. Let it lie there. The notebook went into the archive. Levin's work was saved. Years passed. 1947, 1948. Victor worked, survived, waited. He no longer wrote to Nina. There was no point. He wrote in his notebook a textbook for Katya, which she would never read. He wrote so as not to forget who he was. He was Professor Kardashov, physicist, father, human being. On the 5th of March 1949, Stalin died. The country froze. In the camps, the prisoners whispered, "There will be an amnesty. They will pardon the politicals, release everyone." But there was no amnesty. Instead, there was silence, uncertainty, fear. Victor did not believe in amnesty. He believed in his term, another 6 months. On the 15th of August 1949, Victor's term ended. He was called to the guardhouse, given a certificate of release, civilian clothes, 30 rubles for the road. You are free, Kardashov. You may go. But bear in mind, you are forbidden to live in Leningrad, Moscow, and regional centers. Restricted regime. You can settle in a village, in a settlement. You will find work in your specialty, if they will take you. Victor took the certificate, went out through the gates, looked back. The camp stood behind barbed wire, barracks, towers, the zone. There remained his 4 years. There remained the stoves that had saved hundreds of lives. There remained Levin, buried in a common grave. There remained his youth, his family, his life. He walked along the road. The taiga stood like a wall. The sky was high and indifferent. He was free, but he did not know where to go. To Leningrad he could not go. To Nina he could not go. There was a stranger there. To Katya he could not go. She did not know him. He was free, but he was alone. Completely alone. In the pocket of his padded jacket lay 2 notebooks. One was his textbook for his daughter, which she would never read. The second was Levin's theory, which he had promised to publish. He walked along the road and thought of one thing. He had survived. He had passed through hell and emerged. He had saved people by building stoves from stolen iron. He had preserved Levin's science. He had remained a human being, a scientist, an engineer.
The system had tried to kill him, erase him, turn him into a number, but he had survived. He had not won, but he had survived. And this was his only small, bitter victory. The victory of a human being over the death machine, the victory of reason over absurdity. He walked along the road a free man, and he did not know what would come next. But he knew one thing: he was alive. Professor Kardashev was alive, and as long as he was alive, his science was alive. The memory of Levin was alive. The hope of seeing Katya someday, perhaps, was alive. He walked along the road into the unknown. But he walked alone, free, alive. May